They called it the City of Light, a massive church complex sitting on 6 acres of land at the edge of the city. Gleaming glass walls, gold letter signage, and guards in black suits. The kind of place people came to take selfies in front of. The kind of place that screamed, "God is here." It was the home of Revival Embassy, and its founder, Pastor Nathaniel Okoro, was not just a pastor, he was a brand. Every Sunday, crowds gathered like clockwork, not just for the message, but for the experience. Worship music blasted through high-end speakers. LED screens displayed live footage, and Pastor Nathaniel would emerge from the back curtain in a designer suit, clutching a wireless mic and a Bible covered in Italian leather. He spoke with fire, walked with power, shouted with conviction. He promised breakthrough to the broken, marriage to the lonely, babies to the barren, prosperity to the poor. God says this is your season of wealth transfer, he'd declare. But you must sow a seed to receive the anointing. And they sowed. Housemaids gave half their monthly salary. Taxi drivers emptied their pockets. Young women dropped gold earrings into offering baskets, weeping. Some people borrowed money just to give big, afraid that if they didn't, God would pass them by. And Pastor Nathaniel? He drove home in a black Lexus with tinted glass, escorted by 2 guards. His house had a personal chef, private gym, and 3 bedrooms that nobody entered, not even his wife. Inside, his life was clean on paper. A devoted husband to Mrs. Stella Okoro, a father of 2 girls, a respected preacher, a counselor to city leaders. But behind the charm was something darker, something twisted. He was addicted, not to drugs, not to money alone, but to power. He knew how to look deep into your eyes and make you feel seen. He knew how to hold your hand during prayer and leave something lingering. He called young women daughter of Zion and touched their backs a little too long, and nobody questioned it. Because when a man can quote 5 verses in 5 seconds and make the lame dance on stage, who dares call him out? That's the world Mirabelle walked into. She was 20, soft-spoken, raised by a single mother who sold vegetables. She had never entered a church so grand before, but the first time she heard the choir, she wept. It felt like heaven. They gave her a form to join the youth choir. She passed the auditions in a heartbeat. Pure voice, beautiful tone, quiet spirit. Pastor Nathaniel noticed her immediately. He said God revealed she was special, that she had a calling, that he wanted to mentor her personally. She thought it was a blessing. She didn't know it was a trap. He started small. A handshake that lingered. A compliment whispered during rehearsal. A text message after service. You sang with such purity today. The Lord is pleased. For Mirabelle, it felt like light. She had grown up in small churches where the microphone crackled and the pastors barely noticed her. Here, she was seen, encouraged, celebrated, and not just by anyone, but by the man of God himself. He called her daughter, said he wanted to cover her spiritually, told her she carried a rare oil, a gift from heaven, that God had plans for her, but she needed guidance, discipline, a mentor who truly hears God. So, she met him privately, first in his office, then after midweek services, then in his study at the back of the church. And every time, the line moved a little further. At first, he laid hands on her head, prayed, told her she was too pure to be around ordinary boys. Then one day, his hand moved to her shoulder, then her back, then her thigh, but he always prayed after, so it felt okay. Whole even, she wasn't the first. Before Mirabelle, there was Blessing, a girl who used to lead worship before she suddenly disappeared. Then Lillian, who once confessed during a night vigil that she was battling lust. No one knew what happened to her after, but people didn't talk. Or when they did, they said things like, "Let's not touch the Lord's anointed." If she fell, that's between her and God. Our focus should be on the word, not gossip. The elders stayed quiet. They were too busy counting offerings, managing building projects, or planning the pastor's birthday celebration, which cost more than the church's yearly outreach. One night, as Mirabelle cleaned the choir room, he walked in unexpectedly. He told her he'd had a vision, that the enemy was plotting to use her beauty to destroy her destiny, that only intimacy with anointed vessels could seal her protection. Then he kissed her. She froze, then gave in. It didn't feel right, but it didn't feel wrong, not immediately, because Pastor Nathaniel had a way of making sin sound sacred. And when she cried afterward, he said, God understands. You're covered in grace. Mirabelle didn't tell anyone. Not her mother. Not her closest friend in the choir. Because in Revival Embassy, if something bad happened to you under the pastor's roof, you were blamed. They'd say, "What were you wearing? Why were you alone with him? You must have seduced him." So she stayed silent. She prayed harder, fasted, sang louder in church, and inside, she broke quietly. By now, Mirabelle had stopped trying to make sense of it. She had convinced herself that maybe she was the one who misunderstood, that maybe this was how mentorship worked, that maybe it was normal to cry after spiritual intimacy, because Pastor Nathaniel was still preaching, still laying hands, still drawing massive crowds. If God was angry, he was being very quiet about it. Meanwhile, the church was booming. Every Sunday, the media team dropped cinematic sermon clips online, slow-motion shots of Pastor Nathaniel pacing the altar, sweat glistening on his forehead, violin music playing under every prayer. He had over 200,000 followers on Instagram. Companies paid to advertise during his live streams, and people kept giving. He preached that God didn't like small dreams, that poverty was a curse, that anyone who wanted to prosper must give like Abraham. And so, people gave. One woman sold her land to connect to the anointing. A young man dropped his school fees as a sacrifice for financial speed. And every Sunday, Pastor Nathaniel's suits got sharper, his watches more expensive, his cars multiplied, but he called it proof that God rewards the faithful. At night, Mirabelle sometimes heard him on the phone when she stayed behind after rehearsals. His voice lowered, serious, sometimes flirtatious. Once, she heard him say, "I don't want you to wear a bra the next time we meet. You're my covenant daughter." She knew it wasn't meant for her. She wasn't the only one. One Sunday, during choir rehearsal, she found a diary. It had been left behind by an older choir member who stopped attending months ago. Blessing. Inside were pages of prayers, confusion, and one final entry. "I don't know if I'm crazy." He said God speaks through his body. That was a privilege. But if this is God, why do I feel dirty after? Mirabelle's heart pounded. It wasn't just her. She hadn't been chosen. She had been targeted. She started paying attention. One usher girl never looked him in the eye. Another choir member avoided rehearsals when he was around. A volunteer once stormed out of the church after being called into the pastor's study. There were signs everywhere, but wrapped in silence. Because who would they tell? Who would believe them? Backstage during a youth conference, Pastor Nathaniel touched Mirabelle's waist as she fixed her mic. She flinched. He pulled her aside, whispered with a smile, "Don't disrespect grace, Mirabelle. You've come too far to fight it now." And that night, for the first time, she felt disgust instead of shame. The seed of resistance was planted, and it would soon grow into something dangerous. The sickness started slow. She thought it was stress, or maybe hunger. She hadn't eaten well in weeks. But then her breasts felt tender. Then the smell of onions made her vomit. Then her period didn't come. It couldn't be. She paced in her tiny room, hands shaking, staring at the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines stared back at her. Positive. For a long time, Mirabelle sat on the edge of her bed, hugging herself. She hadn't been with anyone else. This wasn't a mistake or a coincidence. It was a child. And now, the thing she had buried deep inside her, the guilt, the silence, the confusion, was growing into something that could no longer be ignored. She sent him a voice note. Calm, direct. "Sir, I'm pregnant." No reply for 3 hours. Then finally one line. "Where are you? We need to talk." They met in his car that evening. His face was different. Not the warm spiritual father. Not even the stern mentor. Just cold. She told him she was keeping the baby. He stayed quiet for a long time. Then he exhaled, rubbed his face, and said, "Mirabelle, this cannot come out. It will destroy everything." "I didn't plan this," she whispered. "I know, but there are enemies everywhere. People who want to see me fall. You can't give them ammunition. So what do you want me to do?" "We'll take care of it. Quietly. I'll arrange something safe. You'll heal, and life will go on." She looked at him, really looked at him. This wasn't about her. This was about his image, his empire, his throne. "No," she said. "I'm done hiding. I'm not doing it." He stared at her, eyes dark. "Do you know what you're doing? If this comes out, you won't survive it either. They'll tear you apart, call you names. You'll be the Jezebel. Not me. Then so be it. She opened the car door and walked away. The next day, she told her mother. And the day after that, she called Blessing, the girl who wrote the diary. Blessing broke down on the phone. She had moved far away, but said she'd been praying for this moment. If you speak, I'll speak too, she said. Mirabelle sent a message to the church's youth leader. I need to talk to the elders. In person. It's about Pastor. What she didn't know was that Pastor Nathaniel had already found out. One of the assistant leaders, a man who owed him everything, had told him immediately. And that night, when Mirabelle left a pharmacy and walked home alone, someone was waiting. They said it was a robbery, that Mirabelle had been walking home too late, that maybe she struggled, that it was a tragedy. But people whispered differently, because nothing was taken. Not her phone, not her tiny purse, not even the new box of prenatal vitamins still sealed in her hand. She had been found in a dry canal on the city's edge, her dress torn slightly at the shoulder, her face bruised. There was no CCTV, no known witnesses. The church cried on stage. The congregation wept in rows. The pastor held a microphone, his voice shaking. We've lost a daughter, a star in the making. But we must not question God. They didn't let her mother speak. Mama Grace sat alone at the burial. Not one church elder sat beside her. No official visit. No condolences beyond a prepared note read by a junior pastor. When she asked to speak to Pastor Nathaniel privately, she was told, he's in deep fasting. He's broken. But she wasn't fooled. She had seen the late-night texts once, when Mirabelle had dozed off beside her. She had heard her cry, silently in the bathroom. She had seen the fear in her daughter's eyes when the pastor's name was mentioned. And now her child was gone. A week after the funeral, Blessing came forward. She released a handwritten letter online. It began, My name is Blessing Obeisai. I used to be the worship leader at Revival Embassy. I've carried a secret for 3 years. She told the world about how Pastor Nathaniel manipulated her at age 19, how he said her voice was anointed, and then slowly turned prayers into pressure, touches into threats, holiness into shame. She said Mirabelle had contacted her 2 days before her death. She told me she was pregnant. She said she was going to expose him, and now she's gone. The church denied everything. They released a formal statement calling it a demonic attack against the ministry. Pastor Nathaniel held a press conference, wiping fake tears with a white handkerchief. This is spiritual warfare. I'm innocent. The devil is using broken people to destroy what God is building. But the internet wasn't fooled. People began speaking. More girls. Former ushers. A married woman who had once served as his PA. A teenage member who left church 2 years ago and never explained why. Stories spilled like oil from a cracked bottle. One line appeared over and over again in different voices. He told me not to tell anyone. That God would punish me if I spoke. The police reopened the case. Brother Felix, the assistant who had arranged the car and paid the boys who followed Mirabelle, was arrested. His phone was full of deleted messages. He cracked quickly. He wasn't built to carry blood. And in his confession, one name came up again and again. Pastor told me to handle it. They came just before 6 a.m. for police vans. A quiet knock at the gate. His guards were confused. His daughters were still in their pajamas. His wife, Stella, had known it was coming. Pastor Nathaniel stood in his living room in a black robe, barefoot. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just turned, looked at his wife, and said, "Pray for me." She didn't answer. The news exploded. Breaking. Popular pastor arrested in connection to choir girl's death. Wolves in the church. Multiple women accuse Revival Embassy founder. The prophet, the pregnancies, the silence. Social media became a courtroom. Former members uploaded clips of his old sermons, shouting about purity and holiness, layered with the words of victims, describing how he touched them, threatened them, and blamed them. A young man shared a photo of his mother crying after giving 300,000 Nigerian nairas to connect to wealth. She had to borrow money to buy malaria drugs the next month. The spell had broken. At the courthouse, he tried to smile for the cameras. Still wore a clean white caftan. Still held a Bible. Still called himself a servant under attack. But inside, he was losing everything. The church board removed him. Sponsors pulled out. The Revival Embassy building was locked down by authorities. A criminal investigation team found fake healing testimonies scripted and paid for. Millions in cash were unaccounted for. And most damning of all, the recording. From Brother Felix's second phone, retrieved after his arrest. A voice. Calm. Familiar. She's about to become a problem. Handle it. Quietly. It wasn't just evidence. It was the final nail. His wife filed for divorce. His daughters changed schools. Their names were taken off social media. Some said Stella had known about the cheating for years, but never imagined it would lead to death. She made one public statement. I trusted a man who wore the robe of God, but lived as a king among slaves. He was never accountable to anyone. Not the elders, not me, not even God. And what about Mama Grace? She stood in court the day sentencing was announced. In a navy blue dress, hair tied neatly, hands steady. The judge read the charges. Accessory to murder, abuse of office, sexual exploitation, obstruction of justice, 25 years in prison. No parole. Pastor Nathaniel sat quietly in the dock, eyes wide but glassy. His face looked older. The man of God, mask was gone. Now just a man in a white shirt, scared, defeated. As he was led away, Mama Grace whispered, "You silenced my daughter." But God remembered her. Revival Embassy was never reopened. The land was eventually sold to a small school that now gives scholarships to low-income girls. A group of former female members formed a nonprofit, Voices of Zion, supporting girls abused in church settings. And Mirabelle, she became more than a headline. Her name echoed in every conference, every podcast, every survivor's post that began with, "I was afraid to speak, but then I heard about Mirabelle." Not everyone who stands on a pulpit is sent by God. Some pastors use the name of God to lie, to steal, to control, and to destroy. They collect money from the poor to live rich. They preach purity, but abuse young girls in secret. They threaten people with curses to keep them quiet. And the sad truth is, people let them. We fear them more than we fear God. We protect their image more than we protect the victims. We stay quiet, even when we know something is wrong. But silence helps no one. Mirabelle didn't die because of one man's evil. She died because too many people looked away. If your church teaches you to ignore pain, to cover abuse, or to worship your pastor like a god, walk away. True faith speaks up. True faith protects the weak. True faith tells the truth, even when it's hard.